night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time until it wasn't. We had a free agency frenzy, at least that's what the transition says. The Lakers added the reigning sixth man of the year. They agreed to terms with free agent big man Montrezl Harrell. He's going to play his home games at the same place that he did after spending the last 3 seasons with the Clippers. As for those Lakers, they agreed with Harrell not long after Dwight Howard agreed to a 1-year deal with the 76ers. Our Bobby Marks reports that that deal is for the veteran minimum exception of $2.6 million. Kings guard De'Aaron Fox has agreed to a max extension worth at least $163 million over 5 years. His agent told Bobby Marks he was the number 5 overall pick out of Kentucky in 2017. Veteran sharpshooting forward Danilo Gallinari finalizing a 3-year, $61.5 million deal with the Atlanta Hawks. His agent of CAA Sports tells ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, and Steven Adams is headed to New Orleans as part of the Drew Holiday trade. Adams averaged almost 11 points and just over 9 rebounds last season for Oklahoma City. As for a few of the other deals that got done in the NBA, the Jazz reached agreements with both Jordan Clarkson and Derek Favors, who will be returning to Utah. Joe Harris is staying with the Nets after signing a 4-year, $75 million deal. And Mason Plumlee is headed to the Pistons. His deal, Randy, for 3 years and $25 million.
All right, El, thank you. Woj is with us all morning here on SportsCenter AM. And Woj, let's talk about this Montrezl Harrell deal. A surprise, even to Patrick Beverley, who tweeted, "What?" And then a couple of choice emojis here. So fun for his soon-to-be former teammate. How did this deal come together?
Well, after Dwight Howard surprised the Lakers, took that offer in Philadelphia, Montrezl Harrell needed a home. And the Lakers moved in, offered him their full mid-level exception. So now he'll go from being, playing that six-man role in with the Clippers to perhaps now the starting center for the Lakers.
That's one heck of a lineup they're building, continuing to build with the Lakers there. And one deal that El told us about is the Drew Holiday deal and how Steven Adams moves to the Pelicans as a part of that. What more can you tell us about behind the scenes with a move like this?
Well, you've seen now Oklahoma City has moved toward a full rebuild. They traded Chris Paul. Danilo Gallinari is reported is going to Atlanta. And now Steven Adams, one of the most popular players in Oklahoma City's, league history. He'll go now with a year left on his contract. The Thunder get something for him. They get a first-round pick via Denver as part of that larger deal, a couple second-round picks. And Steven Adams will anchor that back line for Stan Van Gundy in New Orleans with a lot of young players, few better influences, locker room, and a player who can still play at a very high level.
Talk about building a culture. He's a guy who can do that there for Stan Van Gundy. That's Adrian Wojnarowski with the very latest. He'll be with us all morning on NBA Free Agency.
Well, yeah, Aaron Baines is a guy that everybody's sort of wondering about because there's that second-tier level of center that a lot of the good contending teams need. Bobby, I don't know if you've heard this, but, Boston obviously needs some more depth at center right now, having done the Enes Kanter trade. Baines is a guy that I think you look at in both LA teams. Any team that needs a good center who can provide some toughness is going to look at Aaron Baines, maybe even like a New Orleans Pelicans, somebody physical to stand next to Zion. I think he's got a good market. It's just a question of Phoenix can outpay everybody.
And this is a deep, out of the five positions, this is deep. This is probably one of the deepest, with Baines and Howard and Nerlens Noel. We'll see what happens with Serge Ibaka and Christian Wood, Montrezl, Harrell, players like that. This is probably the deepest position out of this group of free agents.
All right, I want to move on a little bit because we've been discussing how. Oh, yeah, Brian.
Yeah, don't forget about Hassan Whiteside, who there may be some interest in Sacramento to bring it back where it all started. No. But I've heard, like Ramona has, the New Orleans Pelicans are interested in the center market. In addition to Aaron Baines, they could kick the tires on Marcus Morris, although I expect him to stay with the LA Clippers. When it comes to the Phoenix Suns, they had an option to wait to do this Chris Paul trade and open up salary cap, a little bit more salary cap space after 6 o'clock tonight when the new league year happened. But instead, they did the Chris Paul trade anyway, which has led people to believe that they have some traction on something with Saric. So I would expect Saric, as Bobby mentioned, to be back in Phoenix for next season.
I do want to get to Gordon Hayward because we've been discussing, guys, how he could pass on that guaranteed $34 million next season. He's already declined the option. Of course, he could always sign back with Boston again. But can you clarify, Bobby, his motive for taking a pass on that much cash?
Yeah, he's our Al Horford this year. Remember last year, Rachel, we were talking during the show, and we were saying, where in the world is Al Horford going? And now it's kind of where in the world is Gordon Hayward going? And I think with Hayward, he is looking more at years 2, 3, and possibly 4 on this contract. It looks like he is willing to take less. He's at, as you said, he opted out of $34 million. So if that number comes in at 25, let's say, and he can get some guaranteed money in years 2 and 3, let's say maybe a total of $50 million, or maybe if it's a 4-year contract, a total of $75 million. That's the motivation for Gordon Hayward. And I think the risk was if you opted into this number, who knows what happens next year based on his injury history, what is his role in Boston for this upcoming season. So we'll see. It's either going to be, certainly New York we've talked about. We'll see what happens with a team maybe in Charlotte. That's, certainly has been linked to him, maybe back to Boston. And then, of course, the sign-and-trade route. And, going the sign-and-trade route at a lower number certainly would help a team like Indiana, and which, would become with the hard cap there. So, as I said, willing to take less this year, but to make it up on the back end.
Yeah, Bobby's absolutely right. Some other names where this has happened. Harrison Barnes did the same thing. Remember, he opted out of his deal. Everyone said, what are you doing? And then he goes and signs for a lesser annual average, but overall more guaranteed money. But Rachel, if I could, I want to tell you the story of a player named Jake Voskuhl. Jake Voskuhl was a journeyman big about a decade and a half ago out of UConn. He played here, he played there. And I remember Jake Voskuhl had a contract that was $2 million. He opted out. And everyone said, Jake, what are you doing? Where are you going to get money like that? You're a minimum guy. And lo and behold, Jake got paid $3 million on his next deal. And do you know who his agent was? It was a man named Mark Bartelstein from Priority Sports. And do you know who represents Gordon Hayward? It's Mark Bartelstein from Priority Sports. So don't be surprised if Priority has a deal lined up somewhere for Gordon Hayward, because you don't typically tell your client to give up on $32 guaranteed million unless you have something greater than 32 on the horizon.
Well, I think what's interesting with Gordon Hayward and Bobby, I think the Indiana option is really interesting for him. He obviously played there in college. He's got some roots there. He'd fit very nicely on that team. Who would be going back? But with Gordon opting out here and trying to get more years, a lot of the suitors I think you would see for him would be the same teams that courted him a few years ago when he was a free agent. But a lot of those teams are holding their money for 2021 in that free agent class, which is when we come back to Giannis. Okay, if those teams think that Giannis is going back to Milwaukee, they don't have to keep their cap space open for 2021. Well, a lot of people in the team were expecting that after the moves the Bucks did, Giannis will eventually re-sign in Milwaukee. But what do we make of it now?
Well, I think let's start with Milwaukee.
So the word went out that Gordon Hayward. The word went out that Gordon Hayward was going to probably opt out of this contract about a month ago. And in that month, let me tell you the teams that I have heard connected to Gordon Hayward. Cleveland, Detroit, Atlanta, New Orleans, Charlotte, New York, Boston, and there's even some more. His representatives, as Amin said, have vetted the market. Now, Indiana makes the most sense. It is home. He would be a good fit there. But Indiana's payroll is in excess of $120 million right now. In a pandemic where their ownership has been particularly hard hit because it's based in malls and big properties like that. Their stock of Herb Simon, their owner, has dropped dramatically since the spring. So if it's a deal that adds money to Indiana's payroll, I don't see it. If it's a deal where he takes a pay cut, drops down, and also Indiana offloads likely more money than bringing in, then I think it's something that could happen. Or if Indiana makes another deal somewhere else to offload money that makes a sign and trade more viable. And that's really been a sticking point here. I think there's mutual interest between Indiana and Gordon Hayward. It's just a road to get there with the amount of money Indiana has on its books.
Well, Brian, and I also think from Boston's sake, you've got that Jason Tatum extension that's going to be coming down that would start next year. And how much money do you want to commit long term as far as what you are taking back? And if it's a guy like Miles Turner who's got 3 more years left, I think if I'm Danny Ainge, I would certainly zero in on Victor Oladipo if that's the guy I want, or even a guy like T.J. Warren.
It's been so interesting. Zach Lowe has been on our show a couple times over the past week talking about the complications with a potential Indiana-Boston deal that involves a sign and trade for Gordon Hayward, and that is certainly one of the things we are watching the most closely today as we tick toward The free agency window, it starts in just a few moments. Now, I don't know how Gordon could talk to any of these teams because that would be tampering. And, of course, there's no tampering apparently in the NBA. I just learned that.